Hey Pool Chasers, this episode is brought to you by Merlin Industries. Each Merlin liner is custom designed and manufactured in 100% North American virgin vinyl. That means no offshore material and no reground material. They also offer some of the most impressive lead times in the industry. To check out your special offer on vinyl liners, visit merlinindustries.com/poolchasers. Thank you for joining us today in episode 93 of the Pool Chasers podcast. As always, our mission is to help educate and inspire in the form of a podcast. So, you know how you have to take 16 snapshots to get the perfect photo each time? You focus on the subject while taking into account every angle and what's going on in the background. Have you ever thought to look at a backyard or a swimming pool in the same way you would when framing up that photo of a beautiful sunset? Well, that's how our guest today sees every project he works on. Drawing inspiration from a background in architecture and a deep appreciation for the Japanese culture, his projects not only give the ultimate Zen experience, but some would say they can even freeze time for a moment. His designs truly tell a story as he unveils each layer at a time. It was such a pleasure to listen to him talk about his work, and we will never look at a pool the same. We were honored to have him here on the podcast, so we hope you draw as much inspiration from him as we did. Please enjoy this episode with Kirk Bianchi of Bianchi Designs.
Welcome to your go-to podcast for the pool and spa industry. My name is Tyler Rasmussen.
And my name is Greg Viafania. And this is the Pool Chasers Podcast.
All right, well, thank you for joining us today, Kirk. We appreciate you being here on the podcast with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, would you mind introducing yourself to listeners, please?
Yeah, I'm Kirk Bianchi, and Bianchi Design has been my company since 1999 in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Very nice. Yeah, we want to kind of go back to the beginning and focus on your story a little bit. Can you tell us kind of where you grew up and how that led to you being the well-known designer you are today?
Thanks. Well, as a kid, I grew up in Detroit suburbs. Sterling Heights is a suburb of Detroit area. And, as a kid, I was always into drawing and model building and photography, kind of the artsy kid who would hang out at home, and we had finished basements, so all winter long you got to be crafty back in the Midwest.
Yeah, that's
nice.
And,
by the time I went to high school, from a small school to a big school, I was really excited about all the offerings that a big school had, wood shop and metal shop and architectural drafting. So I was all keen on taking that class. I actually didn't get in. It was full. But I did get into an art class, and my art teacher saw my drawings and went over and grabbed the architecture teacher and got an override because she had seen some of my drafting work that I'd already been doing on my own. So she made sure I got in. That was pretty cool. I'm glad she did that. We had architectural drafting all 4 years of high school, 3 hours a day, every day of the week. And I guess you call that a head start. We had statewide architectural competitions with, $4,000 cash awards. Well, not cash, but like a bond and scholarship kind of awards. And junior and senior year, sometimes it was residential designs. One was a shopping mall. Another one was a dance pavilion on a beach that was a concession stand by day and a dance pavilion by night. So it had to be a multi-function situation. Ironically, it looks very much like it was made from shotcrete because it was very freeform and carved out of a hillside. So we had this background going on right in high school, and that really gave me a head start. My junior year, over the summer, my dad took his 5th business trip to Japan and had me along. So I got to go there for a month. And that was really profound and life-changing. I didn't realize it at the time. And, I just really got immersed in their their Zen way of living, their indoor-outdoor architecture. It was really amazing. I mean, everything that they did there, down to the taxi cab driver and the back seat of their car, is meticulously maintained. Everyone's proud of their work product and their workmanship. They own their space. And I was waiting 30 minutes for a fruit plate in the cafe in this, small business hotel we stayed in. Just something in between meals. And it took like a half an hour. And it came out and it was this beautiful carved array of this fruit plate that was magnificent. Like, you'd see it at AJ's. We have these gourmet stores here. And they were peeking out from behind the kitchen to see my reaction to this art piece that they had crafted for me. And I wish I'd had a camera. I could hardly eat the thing. So it was just, for a month, that was the level of craft that I was exposed to. And it was pretty exhilarating and fun, and not to mention their Japanese gardens and all that. Those were all just amazing. So, I went to ASU for college, took 3 semesters of Japanese, determined I was going to go back. And that's part of how I selected ASU, is they had a Japanese language department, and as well as architecture. And if you're going to be studying in January, you may as well be outside under a palm tree instead of cooped up in a cellar in Lansing or Detroit, Michigan. So, ended up at ASU and loved it. And one of my favorite classes was architectural history, art history. They really talked a lot about the composition and design of the, what's on a canvas or what's in the architecture, how to critique architecture, good, bad, what are the merits of, an architectural work, and how to break it down. I got a lot out of those classes, more than I even realized at the time. And because I still use them to this day, how to compose a backyard or whatever I'm working on. So that's really my educational background. The pool component of it, I had taken a break from architecture, and I was working at the Ritz-Carlton, just figuring out my next step in life, because I was kind of burned out on the architectural corporate scene. It wasn't very creative and fulfilling. The firms I was working at. And I was actually at an accountant's office waiting for my appointment, reading the business journal. And they were interviewing different people, what they did for a living. One was a bug sprayer guy. Another one was an AC tech. And then there was Ted Miller, ex-professional fisherman turned pool designer. I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. And then I had my appointment. And 2 weeks later, I'm at the hotel, and it's really bugging me. I need to go find that article. I couldn't remember the name or the firm. So I rummaged through the recycle bin and found the paper. And I was glad for that. It was still there, and looked him up. And when I got home, and I said, Ted, I'm a burned out architecture student, but it sounds like you're having fun. And he laughed, and he's like, yeah, well, do you want a job?
So welcome to the pool industry.
And that was in 1991. Here I am. So when life, when there's a fork in the road, take it. I went down there that afternoon, all preppy ASU style, and I walked into a den of Harley guys. Kind of growled at me, like, who are you? And, oops. I had my portfolio in tow, and I met the owner and showed him my drawings and renderings, stuff I had done in high school. And the next day, I'm in a hole digging a swimming pool, trimming the walls, because they did in-house excavation. Because if you dig is off, then the pool's off. So they did in-house excavation. They did in-house boulder compositions and waterfalls, and they did in-house sand finish and different levels of exposed aggregate concrete. That was their 3 favorite things that they just didn't feel they could farm out. So by day, I was in the hole, digging pools, trimming pools, pouring concrete, setting boulders. I was the guy that would grout the waterfall, make sure it didn't leak. And that's all we did back then, was boulder freeform stuff. But that first day, the owner had a drawing that was just kind of a napkin sketch. I knew he was going on a meeting the next day, so I stayed after hours and did a marker and pencil rendering for it. And he came into the office the next morning with his plan all rendered out. And he's like, damn, well, I guess you should go with me to present this. So at night, I went out with him on sales calls and helped present the drawings and was his sidekick by evenings. And we would meet the client, do the interviews, figure out what they wanted, come back, do a drawing, present it together. And I got introduced to the world of commission percentage of, how to make an income instead of hourly. I was getting paid on a percentage. That was very inspiring. And because that was one of the things that I didn't understand in architecture school, this, help me connect the dots and how to make a living. The idea of, being paid a percentage of what you bring to the table rather than just an hourly rate or a salary, it seemed like it was just a nice model, nice introduction. And so by 2 years later, he'd give me a name and a number and say, here, run with it. Because I'd been in the field doing the work, building, and I'd been on with him on sales calls in the afternoon. And it was really awesome. Just got to, sink or swim. I ran the whole job. I was the superintendent for my own projects. Design it, price it, pick up the checks, meet the trades, and wish them farewell when the project was over. And it was kind of a all in one kind of place to learn.
So what was your plan when you started working for him? I mean, were you going to just work as a tradesman, or did you plan on actually drafting, some different plans for the pools he was building? Because it sounded like he might not have known what your skill set, really was. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a good question. Well, I just went, what was my expectation? I was just going to just do everything I could there to make that an awesome experience. I was excited about learning a craft that was artistic and yet economically profitable. That was what I was trying to reconcile in architecture school, which was all theory and highfalutin. It just didn't translate into because all the architects I was interviewing were all telling me I didn't want to do this for a living, that you'd be 80 hours a week, laid off, broke, and divorced all in the same month. And they were literally 8 or 9 architects I interviewed were like, you don't want to do this. This sucks. Do it for a hobby. And I was working at the Ritz-Carlton just to get a break from that and figure out, architecture's in my DNA, but how am I actually going to live a balanced life and be a creative person in the world and yet make a decent revenue? Because it's always the starving artist is what your well-meaning family says to you when you grow up. You need to get a job that's practical and pays the bills because, artistic people, they just, none of them had ever owned a business. None of them were creative. So I didn't have any frame of reference whatsoever for what it could look like being a creative person who could, earn a living and be in business for yourself. That was an entirely new thing that I just had to grope in the dark to figure out. So, I was excited to work at this company because here was, creativity and real world and commission all wrapped into one. Hey, I'm digging this. So I really enjoyed that introduction, and I was glad to be working in the field. And, when you're 21, it's all good,
Right. Yeah, you got the build, the body for it, and the energy for it, for sure.
Yeah, you've got the energy, and I was, field by day, take a shower, clients by night. No big deal.
When you, going back a little bit, when you were taking architectural history in school, mm-hmm. What was your favorite time in history for architecture?
Certainly the modern era. I mean, I loved all the mid-century modern lines, and I appreciate quite a bit about Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm not a a diehard Frank Wright person, but I enjoy his workflow and his process and his, there's an undergirding geometry to his designs that you carry through. I really enjoyed that. So, everything in the recent century, I think I enjoyed the most. Definitely not. I can appreciate the craftsmanship, of course, of all the centuries gone by, Baroque and all that. But it's so gaudy and ostentatious and overdone. It's just overwhelming. So I think that's why I really enjoyed Japan, is that it was very austere and zen and peaceful and quiet and calm and not overly embellished and ornate. So I resonated really well with the modern Mies van der Rohe and Chicago and some of the Frank Lloyd Wright and mid-century modern. Those things really clicked with me for the same reasons I just mentioned.
Right. Yeah, I like the Japanese. It has a very distinctive look, and a lot of what they do is just as much about function as it is about the way that it looks. I mean, even their sliding doors, most of the materials they use are wood, but the sliding doors back in the day, were paper, and that was because they wanted the sunlight to come in just the right amount, and they would position it in a certain direction. Yeah, very distinctive look, but also just its own unique style.
Yeah, they're very into celebrating the raw materials, letting, in architecture class, they talk about truth in materials. Don't do fake stuff. If it's stone, let it be stone. Don't make something look like something else. I mean, like the porcelain wood tile look is a classic departure from that. It's. I confess, I'm getting ready to do a project that has a plaster finish. We're considering this. That's going to look like rusted steel. All right. I guess that's a little bit dishonest, but hey, it was 1/5 the cost, and it looks awesome. It really looks good. It doesn't look fake and faux painted. It's a plaster finish that has rust, so that could be a good,
Interesting.
But they're very much about real materials and celebrating the material, letting concrete be concrete, letting steel be steel, letting glass be glass, and expressing how things are built. Show me the connections and the bolts, and not just putting foam and lath and stucco over it. Why not show the hardware? It's really interesting and raw and basic and fundamental and honest. Wabi sabi, they call it in some areas, where something, is old and battered, and that's part of its character. It's something about the stucco world. In America, we use all these latex modified, and stuccos that look pristine and perfect and ubiquitous. And everyone goes to Europe and they like old buildings. And the paint's all peeling off the walls, and it's integral color plaster, and it's not perfect. And I liken it to, fabric. Depression era people loved polyester, custom tailored polyester, because it was always pristine and perfect, and it never wrinkled. You could just take it right out of the dryer and wear it out the door. But what about silk and linen and cotton? It's a natural fiber, and it looks so much more luxurious, but it's imperfect, and that's part of the beauty. So I'm on a kick right now to do more like Venetian plasters and integral color, and try to leave Dunn Edwards behind, because it's it could be so much more interesting. And the contractor responds, "Oh, but it's going to crack." Yeah, so what? You don't wear polyester, do you? Oh, no, of course not. Well, then quit putting polyester all over these walls. And let people know, and then maybe tell them it that way. You love your trips to Europe and Dunn Edwards, and let it crack, let it be variation in color, and it's why we love going to Europe and seeing old buildings.
Right.
It's called character.
But it must be such a, surreal feeling to see like the Colosseum and just what like the ancient Romans had built back in the day, because I still think that is mind-blowing I haven't seen it in real life, but, I've watched a ton of documentaries, and it's just crazy what, mankind has been able to do from a long time ago when they didn't have cranes, they didn't have excavators, they didn't have any of these things. And some of these buildings are still here today. Have you been to the Colosseum before?
I have not yet been to Europe. Japan was my big exodus out of the country. And I know it's crazy. I need to get over there before, Rome burns, literally.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't fall down.
Might be a while right now until you can go over there.
I know. All right. Well,
they talk about Rome a lot in ancient Rome in architectural history.
Yes. Yeah. Rome, Greece, and Renaissance. All of those periods are really, really interesting.
It's interesting how we in America, like we have Renaissance fairs, and like you're saying, we enjoy the trips to Europe and seeing all these old buildings and seeing all this, in its pure. But then everybody builds houses and they just want this like same look, and it's just an interesting kind of thought process that Americans go through.
It's because when the designer and builder come in and tell you how much it's going to cost for you to have a house that looks like it's from Europe, you're like, no, I'll just take one of these track homes.
That might be the case.
Yeah. Well, it's the whole liability thing and the callbacks. They want this perfect stucco finish that's going to be elastic and breathe. And okay, that's all good. But God forbid it should have a hairline crack. And God forbid it should be integral color, because you can't patch that, and I gotta, it's this, we've painted ourselves into a corner where, it's, the flexible stuccos, you paint, come over it, you make it look brand new every couple of years. But our brand new to me is polyester. It's just, why would you do that? I don't know.
It makes sense.
I know. So I've really been, like I said, on a kick to just really explore the plasters and integral color in my wall treatments, and looking forward to doing more of that. And part of the selling proposition is I have to explain to people that like a lime wash paint, it does fade in the sun, and it's like denim, it's its own thing, and it's going to weather and wear. So if you want it to sustain this look perfect from day one and forevermore, well, then you're a perfect candidate for Dunn Edwards and polyester. But I'm not gonna give you that if I can help it. Right. Those people buy into that. They get it. They're like, oh yeah, why are we wearing polyester? I don't wear polyester. And so I like that metaphor.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's helping me to sell the character of something richer and more luxurious.
Yeah, it makes people understand it. It's cool. Here at Pool Chasers, we're all about sharing information so that you can become even more knowledgeable pool professionals. The folks at Pentair get that. And to show their appreciation, we invite you to enroll in the Pentair Partners Incentive Program. This flexible and simple program rewards you for your loyalty, starting with your very first sale of Pentair equipment or systems. Not only that, but being a partner gives you immediate and exclusive access to programs and training events, all which are developed to help drive even more business to your door. So to start earning rewards, visit pentairpartners.com or click the link in the write-up below. So tell us, from that point, working for somebody else, how did you get to the point of working for yourself and building Bianchi Designs?
So I worked with two different companies from about 6 or 7 years total. It was about 1999. And, I recognized that I was more of the designer, cut from that cloth. I wasn't, a natural progression might be, well, how do you become a contractor? And I felt like, well, there was some good contractors, that I knew, and their bulk of their day was scheduling trades and, all the things that go into the construction of a project. And that takes up the bulk of your day. And it was the how, it wasn't the why. When I was at the company I was working at, I was designing the entire backyard, but they in particular fulfilled only the pool. But I'm designing the whole yard, and the owner's like, hey, it's really nice of you to design their whole yard for them, but we don't get paid for that. So why are you why don't you just move on? Give him the pool and move on. And I realized that we were in a different business. And I was into more creating the whole environment, and he was just trying to deliver a piece of it. And that really was an enlightening moment. And a very significant one, because I couldn't figure out where the pool would go until I designed everything around it first. I just knew that was somehow the right order of things. And he, as a typical pool person, would just say, I don't know, let's just put the pool here and let him figure it out from there on, And so we'll talk more about that in a minute. But the pool should be last. It's not. The pool people are the first guys on the scene. They get a blank slate of a backyard, and if they're just limited to delivering a pool, I think they've got this whole place to themselves to just drop in whatever. And then they hand it off to someone else to finish the landscape. And it's just a train wreck. And, and this is I digress a little bit, but I took a test at ASU that said I should be a landscape architect when I grew up. And I'm like, no, why would I want to be the guy who puts shrubbery in front of someone else's really awesome building? How insulting, how boring, how lame. It's like the guy who stuffs kale in between the vessels at the Sizzler salad bar. That's all landscaping is. It's all about, the pool or the architecture, and the rest is the fringe, it's just the window dressing around the corner. I'm like, I had no clue. It was just ironic that I actually am doing that now more than I'm designing pools, as I'm working into being more of a landscape designer than pools. So that's been my progression, a few decades in the making.
So they were right in a way.
Yeah, I had no idea. And I'd already been to Japan too, so that's kind of odd that I'd been to Japan. I'd seen Japanese gardens, so the irony is there. But the going on my own was because, I noticed that the pool companies were only handling a sliver of what was possible. And I knew that I was more of a design person, a creative. I didn't want to be a contractor with a truck and scheduling trades, and I'm more the artsy guy with the crayons and the camera. And so I went on my own as design. I saw that as being a big thing that was not really being offered very well, a big hole in the marketplace. And so I was going to fix that. I was going to save the world from really lousy pool salesmen wreaking havoc in people's backyards, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars without a good plan. I just thought that was wrong.
Was that
very wrong?
Was that a difficult transition to get people to understand or see it that way?
Yeah, it became part of my presentation, was that I was designing the whole backyard. Even though I was known for being the pool designer, I was asking everything else about the yard. And sometimes they'd give me a little humor, a little grief about it, but in a fun way. Why are you asking me about my kid's play area? Like, well, it tells me where the pool isn't going.
Right.
All of these things work subtractively, and the pool's the last piece of the puzzle that goes in. Once you tell the yard everything else it needs to have, you put your Legos away with the big pieces first, right? Then all the little stuff kind of falls into place. So you work from big to large, from large to small, as you're working through a backyard, and then everything starts to have carve its place into the scene. So yeah, I went on my own as design because I just saw that was the hole that was missing. And what my specialty is, I recognize people need a time and a place to slow down, to unplug, to recharge, and that's kind of when I worked at the Ritz-Carlton. They had a really cool credo. It was to enliven the senses, was part of their thing that they enjoyed bringing to pass for their clients. Is everything from the fragrance of the flowers in the lobby to how courteous the staff was, to the aroma of the tea. I mean, the music. It was all of these things that worked together to create a very nice environment. And they articulated it that way in their motto that we all had to memorize. That stuck with me, enliven the senses. And it reminded me of my trip to Japan and how they could, like slow down time and sip tea while watching the snow fall in the Japanese garden. And, in our fast-paced life, I thought, man, people need to do that more often. So I'm trying to deliver that place of respite at home. And how do you actually achieve that? And, some of the things that I've noticed is, good design, it should really kind of quiet the noise and bring a sense of calming reflection. And it makes us appreciate beauty that's really around us every day, but we take it for granted. So how do you do that? And it kind of went back to my photography and art days, because in art class and photography class, they always have you answer the question, what is the subject of this painting? What is the subject of this photograph? And then once you identify it, then, all right, the supporting elements in this painting or photograph, are they accentuating and helping, or are they detracting? And that was how you evaluated a work of art, is that did they consistently reinforce that choice or not? And, whether it was the lighting or the mood or the color palette or the composition of the elements on the page. Maybe there's something going off camera that you can't see, and what is it? And maybe that's the intent, is to create that sense of mystery. But in most situations, let's just still life composition. There's a flower vase on a table and it's got dramatic lighting on it. That's the picture.
And that's one thing that you had mentioned to us, is that you do look at everything from a photographer's eye. Can you share with us what you mean?
Yeah. When you're looking through the lens of the camera, you're composing what you see in that frame. And there's a whole bunch of rules and guidelines as to how to compose the shot. Is the person dead center, or is that kind of boring? Is it maybe slightly a third to one side and 2/3 to the other? There's different ratios of composition that make it more interesting. Or the lines of the table that, or whatever the structures, are they leading your eye into the page, focusing on the subject of the composition? There's all kinds of ways of organizing a photograph. So when I'm looking at a space, I'm literally thinking of it as if I'm photographing the yard. All right, the moment I walk in the front door, I'm looking through the window. That's a canvas. How is it composed? What am I looking at? When I step out on the back patio and I look out across the yard, the very first moment, what am I taking in? That's a canvas. You're looking out your kitchen window, that's a canvas. So compose each of these scenes as if they were a painting on the wall. And a lot of times where I see, failure in that is maybe you've designed a pool or something in the foreground that's interesting on the ground plane. But what about the middle ground? What about the background? So at the same time you're looking at your beautiful element on the ground plane, there's the neighbor's roof behind you with their, air conditioning, HVAC on the roof, and the wall, the property is hideous or ugly and unadorned. And you imagine taking a picture of that from the house looking out. Beautiful pool on the ground, ugly wall, and air conditioning all in the same shot. So why do people miss that? I don't know. It's just you got to address all of those at once. You have to erase that neighbor's roof line and their air conditioner on the roof with a vertical tree that's going to block it out, and maybe treat the wall with a diminishing paint color and stucco so it's not vying for attention. So that now your element that's in the foreground can shine and not be diminished by the ugliness that's right behind it. I think that's the number one thing that I do differently.
I agree. And I love that you look at a backyard and a swimming pool from every direction of being inside of the house, being inside master bedroom, looking out the window, or being in the kitchen, looking out the window, or, wherever you're at on the property where that backyard and pool is going to be. You're thinking about how you're talking about looking at it through a camera lens. And if you were looking through a camera lens, how is it changing in each one of those spaces? I think that is very unique. And I think that's a really, really cool way of looking at it. Because like you're talking about the air conditioning, how quickly you feel like you're not in Japan anymore. You are in a normal backyard with a normal looking pool, where, that background wasn't thought of, because talking about photography and the composition and your line of sight and lighting and all those different things. There's no Photoshop in real life. When you get into that backyard, you can't just brush away that air conditioning unit on your neighbor's roof.
Exactly. And how many times have I been asked to remodel a pool where the pool slammed up against the wall of someone's back property, and there's an ugly, backdrop. And the first thing that needed to go in that yard was the bigger elements, which were the trees. And in that particular yard, the first time it was designed, a tree needed to go there. Maybe it's a small space. All right, well, we need a small tree that's narrow and columnar in its growth pattern. And that's the choice you make to plan along the back wall so that you've photoshopped out that ugly house. Now you know that the pool can't go right up against that wall. The pool is, okay, so it's smaller. It's moved forward a little. But you have to design the backdrop first. And it's, the outer rings of the archery target, if you will. You have to work from the outside to each inner layer. And then the last layer in the middle is the bullseye. All right, okay, now that's where your pool goes. Because you've told it where it can't go, because you've thought of everything else first. Traffic flow, furniture patterns. Where do you want to sit to look at the sunset? Oh, and I want to be in the shade at 5:00 and the sun's going to be over there. So I need a tree here that's going to shade me when I'm sitting at my table. All of these things tell you where the pool's not going. So that's a big beef I have with pool salesmen, pool contracting, is they're first on the job because most of the time the pool gets built first. But then they treat it like it's their 100%, it's their palette. They get to do whatever they want with the space, and they kill it and they ruin it for everybody else because they just came in with their big truck and this is my space. I own it. Here's where the pool goes. And it's just does not synchronize with anything in the background. It doesn't synchronize with any other facet of how the yard wants to live in. And it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. That is just wrong.
Do you feel like it's your job to help the customer figure out how they're going to actually enjoy this backyard and pool that you're going to design? Because maybe sometimes they might not understand how they're going to use it exactly, because it's much more than just a swimming pool. It's a lot more than, whatever other features the backyard might have. It's a big visual piece that is going to give you peace. It's going to clear your mind. You talk about, slowing things down. We live in a world that you can't just walk by something beautiful these days and stare at it. People think you're crazy. It's a good way to, isolate yourself, put yourself on an island. I'm just curious, going through, somebody's backyard and, you're going through all the different steps. Are you kind of having to sort of teach them how they can use this? And are they maybe more excited afterwards because they never maybe thought of using it the way that you're talking about?
Yeah, I enjoy showing people as much as they can tolerate the why behind all of this. And I seem to have attracted clientele with, they appreciate the beauty and the art of my imagery, and they say, well, that's what I want. They may not put their finger on why. So it's kind of fun to show them the why. Here's why you like this pool. It's actually not the pool. It's the background and how it's reflecting in the pool. You're right. I didn't even notice that. It's the background. It says, we have to compose that all at once. And so they really enjoy getting, a look under the hood. And so as much as their curiosity I'll go down that rabbit hole with them. And that's part of my process in presenting a design, even, is I'll show it in layers. I'll only turn on certain layers and and I get them to buy into, well, the first thing we're going to figure out is where the trees go, because we got to block that house. So it's just a blank drawing, and I turn on the trees in the computer. And then we got to figure out where your barbecue goes, because the outdoor kitchen, they're kind of like a garage. You need them, they're functional, but they take up a lot of space, and you don't really want to look at them per se, but they need to be close and convenient, but not in the way. So we're going to figure out where that goes first. And then I turn that layer on. And then as I turn each layer on, they're buying into each layer as I'm presenting it, until, now we know where the pool goes. I've put in the furniture and the fire pits, and now your pool goes right here, and it's lining up with, and then it prevents them from unraveling the canvas or pulling a thread on the sweater. If I just lay down the drawing on a yard, you ever I know it happens a lot where you put the drawing out, they don't understand it, and they say, what if we just move this around, or put this over here, or flipped it upside down and turned it inside out? Would that be okay? You're just going, oh my God, no, but by presenting it in that sequence, they're buying into each location and the functionality of it. They're consenting in small increments to when it's done. And they're like, oh my gosh, I can't even touch anything. It's just, everything's where it belongs. So it's actually become how I present the drawings to keep people from mucking with it. and then the changes are very subtle and minor, because it's like, okay, I know this has to be within this framework, but maybe I need a little more counter space or something. That's easy. It's not you're not flipping the yard around.
I think that's an amazing way to present it. You spend a lot of time thinking about that and designing that element of it and helping them understand and educating them. I could see how they truly understand it when you do it that way.
Yeah, because sometimes less is more. I mean, not like a real hardcore minimalist, but when you try to just stack things on top of each other, it looks really tacky when you do it that way. But when you show somebody that, this is the way that it's going to look, and by doing less, we're actually doing more, it's going to look better in the end.
Yeah, that is a important thing to talk about. And I actually had a client, after I presented design, they brought some imagery up from house, but look, there's this cool sunken fire pit in the middle of the swimming pool. Isn't that neat? Yeah. Why don't you buy another house and we'll do it on that one? They laughed. I said, you guys need to shut off house or whatever you're looking at, because there's so many divergent ideas that just don't want to coexist in one space. So you have to know what makes sense on your property, and not artificially, like a sunken bar like a sunken swim up bar on a flat yard is why would you want to go down into a pit? If you have a hillside and it's fading and sloping away, and you happen to just go down the terrain, okay, now the pool's exposed on that one side, and maybe it works out that's where the kitchen area should be. Okay, then you can have a swim up bar. But it was following the topography. You didn't say, I want a swim up bar on my flat yard and you're going to make it happen. Well, that's called a pit, sir. All right, we're going to dig you a pit for your barbecue in Cabana. And I want you to enjoy being down in that concrete hole. Yeah, no, not really. It's not very pleasant down in a concrete hole. So just designing it, going with the flow of the land, going with the topography, line of sight, all of these things just really help dial it in. And the whole notion of less is more. It's, people want a dramatic, impactful yard that moves them. And, I explained that it's like an iPhone, or something that's so elegantly simple and profound, but it's not cluttered and busy. And you don't have 20 things clamoring for your attention. If we're going to plant a really amazing $10,000 ironwood tree at the end of the yard that's like a piece of art, and we put the pool as a mirror in front of it to showcase that and make it more powerful and light it up so that it's just amazing, and the sunset behind it, that one element is strong enough to stand on its own. You don't need, 20 other things like laminar jets and bubblers over here and a linear fire feature running down the length of the pool. And what else can we do? How about a rain curtain? And how about a rope swing off your roof? Stop.
But I think, there's so many different types of people and designers, and there's different cities and states and countries, that, there's going to be different types of designers, and they're going to have their different niche where you're more contemporary, or you're a minimalist, or you're just doing, backyard resorts with crazy slides in every direction coming off of the house. So, there's all, we've talked before about, there's different classes of people, and everybody likes a different type of pool. So there's a little something for everybody, but that doesn't mean that, whatever, niche you're in designing pools, that you shouldn't take yourself seriously and make sure that you're doing it the best that you can. Because we like how you talked about too, the backyard should be telling a story, and you were just kind of elaborating on that quite a bit about the backyard telling a story. Where did you come up with that idea that you should walk into a backyard and you should feel something and it should tell a story?
Yeah, it's film and photography and the orchestration and choreography that goes into that. Actually, one of my projects in architecture was, we had two, I think, Dionysus and Apollo. I don't know, we had two opposing character gods, if you will, that embody different personality traits or whatever. And we had to design a space for each that embodied their character architecturally. And then the key was we had to transition between those two spaces. And that was the fade from one to the other. So here you have one extreme of this identity, other identity at the other end of the property. And then the space in between was how you transition from one to the other. It was a really fascinating study and project. I got a lot out of that. How do you embody someone's character and their whimsical spirit and translate that into architectural, is it color or is it shape? Is it a very rigid and rectangular, suit and tie kind of shape, or is it more fluid and flowy? I mean, I'm working on a project right now where the house is kind of a prairie style house, and the husband really likes the Frank Lloyd Wright style, but the wife is very whimsical and fluid and not rectangular at all. And how do you satisfy that personality in the midst of, oh my gosh, this is a prairie style house. I mean, it's overlapping rectangles everywhere, and she's all curvy and flowy. And so I really focused on art. We're going to carve out significant areas for focal points of art, and that are maybe at the end of a rectangular line of sight. And at those locations, we're going to have, an art piece that exemplifies exactly what you're talking about. It's a very fluid and freeform sculpture on a pedestal surrounded by, some landscape, and it's a focus, and it's a prime focus of this view corridor that you see from your living room. But it's in the context of a more linear rectangular architectural space. So there's a way to meet people where they're at in a way that doesn't disrupt, like if you buy a Victorian house, but you're a fan of Frank Lloyd Wright, are you going to reskin your Victorian house in Frank Lloyd Wright language? I mean, how what's the word? Abominable. I don't know. That would just be wrong, right? So it's not true to the bones and the character of the house, even though personally you may love that. Okay, well, how can I express that in the context of, all right, I live in this particular style of home. I need to respect and honor that. How can I be whimsical and freeform or whatever and have that be satisfied? But in the context, okay, I also honored the architectural style of the house and didn't ignore it and just, put lipstick on a pig and cover all over it and make it something that it wasn't. That's part of the struggle of what I do. It's very much like a fashion consultant. I mean, can you guys explain why do you hire why would you ever hire someone to be a wardrobe consultant? You know, what's the motivation for doing that?
So you don't look like a fool.
Yeah.
Because a fashion consultant is keeping up with the trends or keeping up with the times, and you get to focus on what you're doing, and they come in and make sure that you look the part.
Yeah. And the realization that has to happen right before you realize that you need a fashion consultant is, oops, I don't really know. I'm getting into new territory here. You know, maybe you're attending a formal occasion with, you know, certain whatever, or a business meeting, you know, whatever, but maybe your sense of design and style is limited, or it only takes you so far, and you want to have that refinement in that, maybe that new space that you're in. And so there's a bit of self-realization that, wow, I'm in new territory and I need to trust the guidance of another. But it's really imperative that the person who's guiding you, and I'm speaking to pool contractors that I use, you know, that you have to know, you know, you have to be able to guide someone through that design experience with them. You know, hey, this is a certain style of house. You're asking for something that's kind of competing with that. Instead of just saying, oh, sure, we can do that, let's do it. You need to be the guy who says, well, maybe there's a better way. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. I wonder how we could satisfy that inclination you have and yet still merge it into the overall scheme of things here, and be able to have that conversation, you know, diplomatically and respectfully and kindly. And if necessary, you know, as a fashion consultant would say, that color just doesn't look good on you. And that's why you hired me, you know, and you need to have that going in, that's your purpose and your role, so that when you finally have to play that card, they trust you and say, all right, you've got my best interest at heart. And so it's a tightrope between, you know, different people's design taste, their upbringing, what's in good taste for the house, what the yard needs. It's a lot of different factors that come into play.
Yeah, I've seen The Devil Wears Prada.
Yeah. It's about my
You're
knowledge
qualified,
too.
man. Let's go for it. Yeah. It's a real similar process, and it's a very similar role to reconcile, you know, different people's tastes and upbringing, and you know, extract their personality and put it into the design, but in a way that's in keeping with the style of the home and the context of the yard, and so forth, to come out with a real tasteful and product that's beautiful. It's not just because you're tasteful as in being a snob. No, there are principles in art that make art really special and shine. And involves stripping things away, taking away extraneous things that don't belong, that are competing and fighting for each other. You know, what is the subject of this photograph? It should be clear. Same thing in a backyard. You know, when this view corridor looking down across the yard, what should I be looking at? And if you choose to put a, you know, real beautiful tree at the end, and it's chosen for its shape and character, then what are the lines? They should all converge. And then you don't clutter over it with, you know, 20 other things that are vying for attention and stealing the show. You actually want to reinforce that decision you made just a moment ago, to make it more cohesive and stronger and have more impact. So it's the same lessons you would learn in art composition and photography composition that can directly apply to a backyard.
Yeah, and you've talked about building up that anticipation. You can enter the backyard or see it from anywhere, and it's cool to kind of see something in the distance or just barely, faintly hear a water feature or waterfall or whatever it may be. And things change. There could be a breeze in the backyard, a wind in the backyard, and it's going to sound a little bit different. But, building up that anticipation, just like, you've said in telling a story, that's what your backyard is doing. And when you're building up that, anticipation, that's a really cool thing. Because I think I think that, myself and Ty, we kind of do the same things every day, where you're with your kids, you have dinner, you're in your backyard, you come to work, whatever. But I think kind of a creative person does their normal routine every single day, but they see the little things in their routine and they see how they can be changed and manipulated and different, and how, this looks a little bit different because of the environment around me is changing a little bit. Because most people are in a routine, and if you can build something that there is a little bit of anticipation in it, I think that just makes life more fun.
Yeah, it really does. And you've mentioned the anticipation part a little bit, and it's something that we could dwell on a little bit, is that it's a little bit of a tease. You don't have to see the water feature the moment you walk in the front door. Mm-hmm. There's times I've done that because the yard kind of laid out that way. But what if you gave them something else that was a focal point that was interesting, just enough to, okay, you see something beautiful from the front door, but you see a little more, but it's off the page. And so it forces you to explore. I need to go towards this focal point. And you go through an open door, and then you open up into a new space to where you can see more, and it unfolds. And now you can see more, and around the corner, okay, the pool is kind of wrapping around the corner, and now it's taking my eye to the diagonal opposite corner. And that's, maybe where the water feature is at the end of the journey. It's not bam, all at once when you open the front door. That's kind of a cliche move sometimes, is seeing the water feature from the front door when you first go in.
But that's such a cool way to look at it, and I don't think we thought about that before. Because if you walked in a front door and maybe there's a window straight ahead and it was just blue sky, like it was like the end of the earth, you'd walk right off it. You couldn't help but be so curious as to what is left or right of that. What is dropping down? What is, like, there's nothing over there but the sky. You can't help but feel something. Mm-hmm. That's a really cool way to see it.
Yeah, the journey is sometimes more fun than the destination is really awesome, but so is the journey getting there. So it's nice to tease it out along the way and not just put it all in one shot. So that way it's a sustained experience. It's something that unfolds over time. It's a lot more fun that way. The journey, the discovery, and then the change in perspective when you get out into a yard and look back. It's a whole nother vantage point where the composition now has to hold up from another angle, and you're looking at elements, in the inverse. So now I'm on the other side of the yard looking back. What does that look like? It all has to work together. So I really, it's three-dimensional sculpture is really what it is. And it, has to look good from all angles.
Yeah, it's a real true work of art. And yeah, you talked about like people in their routines. I think a well-designed pool like that helps break up that routine for people a little bit. And when you build a project, when you educate a customer or client on what you're giving them, what you're providing them, sort of this Zen experience, when you go through your daily routine, you come home and you get to see this whole Zen project, and it puts you in a different change of mindset changes a little bit, and you then enjoy this piece. It's not just a pool people swim in, and you may have kids that do that every day and enjoy it, but it can also be something else that you really get to look at and experience and feel, that sometimes people don't understand that it has the opportunity to be that.
Yeah, there's a music metaphor that I use a lot that, if a kid's banging on a piano or learning violin, that can be pretty excruciating. We have somehow the ability to sense music viscerally and immediately, that if it's a song we hate, we change the station, and it just, because it grinds on your nerves and it agitates us. Off key or off tempo or discordant music is immediate. And somehow our visual world is one layer removed. We don't perceive it as intensely. In fact, we can often tolerate it. Disarray, a messy desk, for instance, can almost be tolerated because, I don't know, for some reason, it's just one layer removed. But once you bring that into order and you quiet it down and you streamline it and you make it beautiful, it's like well-composed music. It has the flourish and then the pause, the anticipation, and then it builds up, and then it's da-da-da-da, and then it's pause. There's that metering out of intricacies and over time, and it's pleasant, and it's people pay big money for that, and that's why the classics are so our masterpieces. Is why is that? And there's an underlying math and proportion to music that we get that immediately, but it's the same in architecture, it's the same in art, and it does affect us exactly the same. A chaotic space affects our nerves and our mind just the same as the kid banging on a piano without good music, but it's more subconscious. And so people don't necessarily, it doesn't have the same urgency, like, hey, change the station is a lot more urgent than fix my backyard. But the end result is, I've had people that have, I did this to my yard 10 years ago. I dropped $150,000 and I'm just finally just can't stand it anymore. And then I fix it. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe we lived with that for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And now it's just this amazing thing. Now they have their friends and family over, and they have weddings in their backyard. I mean, it's this place to go because it's just the place to be. And now it's a magical place to inhabit for them. That, how did they tolerate it for 10 years? So I kind of bring up the music metaphor a lot to people, that whenever they're on the fence, is, I said, this will impact you the same way. It's visual. It's like music frozen in time.
What song do you want people to be going through their head when they see one of your pools?
Do you want me to design to AC/DC or to Mozart? What do you want me to play when I'm drawing your backyard?
Yeah, no, but really though, how do you truly want people to feel? Say they haven't seen this whole process and they just end up in the backyard that you've designed, the backyard and the swimming pool. How do you want them to feel?
I'm big on, the world is so chaotic and crazy and coming at you 1,000 miles an hour, and then it's gone. Then your kids are leaving the house, so it's moving off to college. Were you just born? So I really like to freeze time. I like to slow down time. I like to simplify the space, and I like to do that by really, really, really super magnifying and enhancing something very simple that maybe you take advantage of and walk right by a thousand times. But you accentuate it and make it more interesting and make it the focus. And then people are like, oh, look at that. I've looked at that 100 times, but in this situation, you've forced me to look at it more closely and carefully. Thank you. And wow, that's beautiful. So it really stops people in their tracks, and that stopping them helps them to just slow down. It's a speed bump, They just slow down a little bit, check this out. And as they're walking through the house and they see it out of the corner of their eye, they go, yeah, wow, that's pretty. That's really cool. And it kind of injects that into their psyche, in small doses throughout the day, so that, they're just not as stressed or crazy. So I'm a big believer in slow down and smell the roses.
Definitely. Your logo should be like like a pill, like take the Kirk Bianchi pill, get you a pool and backyard design to have you chill out, slow down a little bit.
That is my logo is a bonsai Japanese maple that's mirrored in a vanishing edge. I came up with that logo out of necessity because I was always talking about this really elegant, sculpturally significant tree at the end of the yard, and we're going to put a mirror of the pool in front of it, and we're going to light it, and it's going to be the singular, awesome Mr. Miyagi crafted, beautifully chosen specimen at the end of the yard, and we're going to accentuate it with the pool and the mirror, and I would have to sketch it out. Oh, okay, well, here. Now that became my logo. I try to do that, from different vantage points throughout the yard.
Right.
And it's that reflection of a tree. You look at a tree, you pass by it 100 times. Okay. Well, now you take the tree and you kind of isolate it in the corner and you give it preeminence because of where you positioned it. It's like on axis from my, certain view corridor. It's right there. I can't not look at it. And then you throw a mirror in front of it on the ground plane. Well, how often do you look at trees upside down? So just the act of inverting it into a mirror image, it doubles it up. It doubles its value. And you're seeing it from an entirely flipped upside down perspective. And so that's why reflections are so cool, as they, the stuff you normally just walk right past, inverted, in case you see a double image, it really helps you to stop and really take a look at something that you've been looking at every day, all day, driving down the road maybe. But it causes you to stop and appreciate what's around us all the time. We take for granted.
Exactly.
We're proud to announce Lion Financial as a sponsor. Since 1979, they have helped make backyard dreams come true nationwide. Lion Financial is a specialist in pool financing solutions, offering low rates, long terms, and unmatched customer service. Lion Financial's experience is unique to pools, not just any type of loan. They are a partner with both the homeowner and the pool builder until the project is completed, ensuring pool professionals are paid on time and in full. It is absolutely free for pool contractors to partner with Lion Financial to grow their business. Lion Financial is committed to providing an excellent customer service experience. Homeowners will never be charged a consulting fee or prepayment penalties, and pool builders will never be charged a swipe fee for accessing their own hard-earned money. When it comes to something as important as a pool and all the memories that come with it, work with true professionals who have your best interest in mind. With more than 41 years of experience in specializing in pool financing solutions, why trust anyone but the experts? For more information, contact Lion at 877-754-5966. Go to lionfinancial.net/poolchasers or click the link below.
So now we're going to move on to something not quite as creative, and that's, charging for designs. What do you think qualifies somebody to be able to charge for a design?
Definitely make sure if you yourself, well, first identify what is your skill, what are you bringing to the table, and compare it to the whole. Like in this outdoor design world, I've identified the fact that, lighting. I work with Jan Gruel, a lighting designer, because I realize that's a whole rabbit hole of interest in. It's more than I know. I know that I don't know. And why would I want someone to buy Costco furniture in front of my really amazing backyard? Why would I leave that hanging? So I've teamed up with some interior designers that I've worked with that are into doing outdoor furniture and fabric selections. They're part of my team. So, and I'm learning later in the game, Morgan Holt, my landscape contractor and plant designer of 12 years, is retired. Morgan, it's been 4 or 5 years now. And I had the choice. I can learn his craft, which I am working on, adding that to my palette. But there's people that I call on that are horticultural specialists, that they know plants all day long, inside and out. Does it grow in the sun and the shade on the north side of a house, in a courtyard, in what soil condition. There's all of these different people that have different areas of expertise. So who are you and what are you? And what do you bring to the table? And if it's not the whole package, then you need to build a team around you so that you can all go in together and collectively charge for that service. And so as I came up through the ranks I came through architecture, and then I was a pool salesman at a pool contracting company. Then I went on my own into design of pools, and I realized that I wasn't everything. I had to put a landscape design people around me. We would go and present together so that we were presenting a cohesive package and not just handing it off. Here's your pool. Good luck. So I'm building up to first, what are your qualifications? What piece do you bring to the table that's valuable, And if, as a pool contractor, if you're into hydraulics and waterproofing and structural things that go into building a pool, and that's what you live and breathe, then don't be a designer. Instead, pair up with someone who is an awesome designer, and that's what they live and breathe, and say, I've got the person for you. You go meet with this person. They're going to do the design. And then when you're done, you bring it back to me and I'm going to build it so it's amazing. But, that's a lot of contractors might step into the art because I want to do it all. And but you're not everything. Recognize where you fit in the team, and then play your role. And surround yourself with the people that can do those pieces. And now you're a hero because you're delivering the entire environment to the client from start to finish, right down to the furnishings and the fabric selections, to make this magazine-worthy photograph. Even if it's a simple yard, it doesn't have to be a $500,000 project that I just described. There's all kinds of levels of service you can give to the layperson and different people of economic standing. So, know who you are, know what your strengths are, and we all have the ability to add to that. I'm learning plants and lighting at this stage in the game. I'm still learning that. I haven't mastered it yet. What I have mastered is how the whole space is organized. What's the overall scheme? That's what I sell inherently, is that my craft is the proportions and the lines of the shapes of the space. So build your team and know what your part is. And as far as, charging for design, absolutely. If it's free, it's worthless. Once you build this team and you can show the expertise of the team and your role within the team, you can put a package together for design. And, I explain to people, a percentage of your project should be for the thought that's going into it. Don't spend 100% on bricks and mortar, because we can just throw it together and hope it sticks against the wall. That's a pretty expensive proposition. There's nothing more valuable than the expertise and how it's going to come together, which is the why. You've got to figure out why you're going to do what you're going to do in the backyard, and then execute it well. But so many people are in a rush to build, and I've got a wedding in 6 months and I want it in my backyard, and I don't have a plan, but just start. Oh my God, that's a disaster. Don't do that. And tell them to go rent a hall. But take the time with your craft and be proud of it and explain all the pieces. And you can absolutely charge for your design, and you should, raise the bar, raise the industry, get really good at the piece that you enjoy, and surround yourself with the people that fulfill the other aspects that you don't enjoy, and go in together as a team. That's what I would advise. And then as what to charge, there's different ways. Is it hourly? Is it a lump sum? Is it a percentage of the project? There's different ways of arriving at a design fee that makes sense. That is a subject for another day. But the principle of giving away designs for free is is horrible in this business. It just so devalues what we do. And if when you're at a firm and you have design and staff and they're out just working the numbers, doing 10 designs for free, and hopefully a certain percentage of it sells, it's just wrong. Raise the bar and give permission to your staff to, maybe start charging for design. And then it gets rid of the people that aren't serious. But then give them something that's worth charging for. You need to have the expertise to put a good design together. So those two go hand in hand.
Right. Yeah, that's great advice. I think we've talked about it a lot before on different podcasts, but figuring out who your client is, and when you're thinking about charging for designs, you're charging probably different pricing for those different clientele, how much time you're going to put into that project. Like you said, the thinking part and the designing part, how much time it's actually going to take. It doesn't take the same amount of time to build a square pool with a diving board as it does some of the more luxurious projects. So
yeah, but to that point, even though the pool might just be a rectangle, have you cracked open your iPhone lately?
Yep.
I haven't, but I can imagine it looks so elegantly simple on the surface. And those are the ones that are the hardest. I mean, some of the most elegantly simple designs that you could present in like 2 minutes took weeks to design,
Sure.
Because of all the 1,000 iterations you had to throw away to get to that so simple and so obvious, where it's like self-evident. Oh my gosh, that's so simple. It can't be anything but that. Well, that took a lot of work, and you threw away 90% of what you did to even get to that, because maybe it's always been, or the client said, I want a rectangle. I like rectangles. Okay, well, where is it in the yard, and why is it situated where it is, and what else is in the yard that's influencing the layout that tells us where the rectangle goes? Is it square? Is it perpendicular to the house? Is it on a diagonal? Is it left of center, right of center, 1/3 out, and 2/3 out? It's just a rectangle. How hard can it be?
No, I get that for sure. My point, I guess, was like, understanding who the client is and valuing your time and how much time you're going to put into each specific project.
Yes. Yeah, they're different. A lot of it's square footage and the list of amenities, maybe the complexities of what's there on the site all come into play.
Sure.
Yeah. Those are very good points that have to be taken on a case-by-case basis, and that's stuff that I'm still learning, and every job is new.
Right. Yeah. Well, you said something to us, to Greg yesterday, that he mentioned to me, and that the furniture and the plants are kind of the icing on the cake, or the crowning element of the project. I thought that was really an intriguing way to look at it. Can you talk about why you think that is?
Yeah, and this goes back to my statement about the fact that I took that test and said I was going to be a landscape designer when I grew up, and I was repelled by that, and the misunderstanding that I had, and as a pool designer exclusively in my early days, and now I'm more of a landscape designer who does pools. You see the flip.
Mm-hmm.
The pools that I design are what they are because I've given thought to everything that goes around them first, and do those really well. I liken these backgrounds to, like a stage on a play or something like that. And it's a movie set. All right, well, you're creating a context for what? The actors. Who are the actors? It's the people that live there. All right, so as you're creating the space, the things that have more preeminence is where the actors are and where the lighting is going to be. That's where the spotlights go. It's where the people are inhabiting. And so what do people enjoy? Well, they're in the furnishings. That's what they're interacting with, is where they're sitting and hanging out. So the furniture, the fabrics, and the plantings are often typically what they're looking at in a landscape. So those two things it's all revolving around the people that are in the space, not the space itself. So, and what they're interfacing with. So what's likely to be the most colorful is the fabrics. What's most likely to be, visually inviting. Hey, come sit over here. It's that seating arrangement around the fire. The fireplace is cool, but the furniture sucks. I mean, that's no fun. So they should be designed together. In fact, a lot of the paint schemes on walls might come out of the fabrics. They should tie together. Pick your fabrics first. They're harder to come by. And then you pull your paint color schemes out of the fabrics that were selected, which is they're the last things to show up on the job, the furniture and the fabrics. But you need them earlier in the game to help, pick your color schemes, because they all want to tie together. But it's the common element is the people. That's the part people interact with. That's the part that they touch and feel every day. It's the most tactile part of the project. And it's what buttons everything up. That's why I have, interior designers that I call on now and that help me furnish a project and carve out a budget for decent furniture. Because you go to all this trouble to create a really cool yard and landscape, but then you leave it to the client to just fumble along. You kind of made it to the 10 yards before the touchdown, and you didn't get it over the line. You haven't scored yet. So that's something that I've added to my plate lately, is to make sure that happens consistently in every project.
It's crazy how much it really is like a movie set. I know Stanley Kubrick is one of my favorite directors, and when he did Eyes Wide Shut with Tom Cruise years ago, he actually recreated New York in London because he was at this age where he didn't want to leave home anymore. He had a family and he didn't want to leave, but people could not tell the difference. And it took him a long time to do this, but he sent a team to New York to take photos of the sidewalks, to measure the sidewalks. He recreated every little detail to match New York City. It's the things like that crazy attention to detail where other people are like, dude, screw it. No one's going to notice that chair looks a certain way, or, that bench looks a certain way, or that building is, it's squared off right here and it's supposed to be rounded. Nobody's going to notice. But it's like, yeah, all those little things that they stack up, and they stack up to become pretty noticeable. But, in all those different things, that's how crazy it really is, like a movie set.
It's subconscious. The music is visceral and instantaneous. Visual things are not somehow. Probably because of our filter in our brain, our heads would explode if we noticed everything all the time. But it's there. And it matters, but it's just below your perception. It's just below your ability to put your finger on it. But that authenticity and that, what they call it in literature, that suspension of belief or disbelief, that you've totally bought into this because it's so real that your mind says, all right, yeah, I don't have to critique this anymore. It's real.
It's normal.
And so if these things that are often swept under the rug is not important, the details of, the grout joints are all full tiles, and you measured the spa so that you didn't have a sliver left over on the end, and you thought of that ahead of time, and you dimensioned it to work out that way. It affects the overall character of the space. People can't put their finger on it. It's not just to satisfy the anal nature of the design guy who drew it. Yes, it does, but it's, no one's going to notice that. You're just crazy. No, it matters. It matters because all of these things add up to creating an environment that feels, wow, this is really thought out. I don't know why, but this place is really amazing. There's something about it it's just put together. It's those kinds of things that when they add up, they impact people. But they can't put their finger on it. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your story, everything with us. I mean, it's been a real joy and honor just sitting here listening to you talk. It's a whole different way of looking at it, and we really respect everything you do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if anybody wants to check out some of your work or follow you, what's your website and other links they could go to?
So website is bianchidesign.com. B as in boy, IANCHI. Design is no S on the end. The Instagram is waterscapes by Bianchi Design.
Cool.
Facebook is the same as Bianchi Design.
Cool. Thank you. I encourage everybody to check it out. There's some really awesome projects on there. One of the last kind of questions we always ask is, do you have a book or podcast that's made an impact on you and your life, and why?
Two things. One is a book, Class, by Paul Fussell, Fussell. And it's a rude awakening. It's he kind of goes through the American culture and identifies the different classes of people that we all don't want to believe are there. And what are the characteristics of the individual classes? What are their beliefs about, what are their values? What are the things that they think are beautiful? And he kind of identifies the stereotypes of the different classes. So one, you can find what side of the tracks did you come up in on? What are your biases? But it also helps you understand, who am I talking to? Who is my client? So where are they coming from? And so it really helps you to, make the right design recommendations that's in keeping with their core values. And it's really a neat book. And it's a little bit rude because it's going to wake you up like, oh my gosh, I do that. I talk that way, or I say those phrases that are, from that certain upbringing. And it's pretty neat how that pegs certain things that are right under our nose, but we didn't see how they were organized. So I really recommend that book.
Yeah. And then you had a podcast listed as well.
Well, there's a interior designer that I took some classes from last year, Terry Taylor, out of Tucson. She has Interior Design Business Academy, IDBA. And it's interior design. Well, it's the same business model. So I took I signed up for a year of coaching through Terry and attended a lot of her workshops. And that was really enlightening, because it really, talk about charging for design. You're a creative person in business. What does that look like? There's a lot of people that, might detract from that or say that's not possible. So you really have to fight for your space and claim hey, this is my craft. This is how I do it. Here's my contracts. Here's how I charge. Yes, your kitchen's $200,000. Hey, can you pass the salt? It just has to roll off your tongue. You have to be able to, own that. And she's really, I think of anybody that I've ever studied, she's really talked about that piece of things, how to be a creative person in business, and how to, to charge for what you do, how to have contracts, how to defend for what you do. I really learned a lot from her. And there's, of course, I learned quite a bit from Genesis and that team of people and their classes. I look forward to doing that again in more depth. The Terry's aspect gave me the pieces of the design business. That's what I was missing in college. They taught you the theory, but they didn't teach you the business side of design, how to go about it in the real world. And that's what was Terry's. I really loved her and what she gave to me last year.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Kurt. We really appreciate you being on the podcast with us. This was very eye-opening to us, and we know it'll be extremely eye-opening to all the listeners as well, because you're not just in a backyard or not just by a swimming pool. It's much more than that. And that's the way that we all need to look at it, because if we look at this differently, then we're going to have much more respect for it, and we're going to be more confident when we're in those backyards. So just want to say thank you once again for being with us.
Thank you for having me, and I'm glad it make a difference. Hopefully I help somebody along the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to find out more about our guest or the sponsors of the show, you can check them out on the links we have provided in the write-up below. We have also provided links to our social media platforms, so please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Our tag is Pool Chasers. If the podcast has brought you any value, please do what you can to support us through our Patreon page by going to patreon.com/poolchasers. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to be updated each time a new episode is released. One last thing. If you're not yet in our Facebook group, join it today to be surrounded by like-minded individuals who are all trying to better the industry. Thank you all for the support. We appreciate your time and your ear.
See you out there, pool chasers.